up to this point, we've really been dealing with U.S. companies, and they're engaging in transactions, in contracts that are denominated in a foreign currency. What if the same U.S. company, or even a Euro company, or any company, has subsidiaries where they are transacting all of their business, not just any all contracts, all business, in a currency that's different than the ultimate currency that the owner of the company, owner of the subsidiary, will ultimately report their financial statements. So now we get into, it's not just changing for a transaction. These companies, they're out there and they're working and they are engaging in activities, and they're making money and they're generating cash flows, albeit the cash flows are denominated in a foreign currency from whatever the parent company, whatever the owner, the invested company, the investing company, whatever their currency is, they own this other company that is engaging in a currency that is not the parent's currency. How do you handle that kind of stuff? Well, I did a little bit of digging other than just looking at the textbook. And I provided you with Deloitte's roadmap to foreign currency transactions and translations. This was issued in 2019. And one of the things that's interesting about all these different CPA firms that you are going to be engaged in interviewing is they all have these types of accounting guides. So if there is a particular firm that you're interested in, I would look at their particular accounting guide with respect to foreign currency. I'm just showing the Deloitte one for this instance. If you're interested in Deloitte, clearly this is a good one to take a look at. But if you're interested in PwC or KPMG or Ernst & Young or RSM or any of those firms that you're going to be interviewing with, Grant Thornton, what have you, they have accounting guides. You should take a look at their accounting guides and get their perspective and use that as an opportunity to say, oh yeah, well we're learning about a topic X, and I was kind of leafing through your accounting guide. I thought it was very interesting. That will give you some degree of insight into how they view things, but more importantly, it shows that you're interested and eager to dig in on the accounting side with respect to these particular employers. So let me just blow this up a little bit so you have a better view. And I wanted to take a look at one particular thing. Now, if we have a foreign subsidiary, right, that is in a different currency, we have to first figure out, well, what is the parent company's functional currency, but also what is the foreign operations functional currency, right? That's one of the key things in doing all of this. And so I took a look at this page here, paragraph, the functional currency approach. And I like this schematic. I like this little diagram, right? So the thing that you've got to do under the functional currency approach, we've talked about functional currency a little bit. We're going to get a little bit more in depth with it here and in the next couple of videos. The first thing you've got to do in step one is you've got to identify each distinct and separable operation within a consolidated group. Now, next summer, you're going to learn about consolidation accounting, and much of it might be just US to US. But you've got to identify every distinct operation within each group, whether it's all US companies or whether it is foreign companies. For each one of those separable operations, distinct and separable operations, you have to figure out what is the functional currency for each one of those. Right? You have to measure the functional currency in each one of those. if there are any assets, liabilities, any operations, revenue, etc., that are not in that functional currency in that subsidiary. Very similar to what we just did. They're doing transactions that are not recorded, that at inception they're recorded, but there have been changes to the foreign currency, right? Any changes, any kinds of assets, anything, right? All assets, liabilities have to be measured in the functional currency. So if you have anything in these separable operations that would have any kind of that is not the functional currency as you determine the functional currency, you're going to have to remeasure, just like we did with those separate transactions. You're going to have to remeasure all of the assets and liabilities. We'll talk a little bit about what kinds of exchange rates you use when you're doing remeasurement. Once you have all of your subsidiaries, each distinct and separable operation, you figured out the functional currency. Every single one of those entities is now lined up with, again, this functional currency may not be the US dollar. It may be the euro, maybe the yen, the yuan, it may be the Canadian dollar, the Mexican peso. That may be it may be functional currencies out there. But anything that is in those functional currencies that's not the functional currency. So if I've got pesos and I've got Canadian dollar transactions in there, I've got to make sure that all those Canadian dollar transactions get translated or remeasured into the functional currency. Then, after I fix that at the subsidiary or the operating unit level, then I have to translate those functional currency financial statements into the reporting currency. Right? That's the 4-step process. If we look at the textbook, and I'm going to just flip over the textbook here real quickly, they do something similar. I don't like this as much as I like how Deloitte has laid this out. Interesting little footnote at the bottom here, the connecting the dots. I like this because it refers back to ASC 830. And what we're talking about here with step 3 is called remeasurement. Step 4 is called translation. So step 3 is remeasurement. Step 4 is translation. And this is, I really like the way they have articulated this particular point. Remeasurement, right, is trying to provide information about each within the functional currency. You know, basically remeasuring into the functional currency is going to give me an idea about what's going on with cash flows, right? Future net cash flows. Translation just converts those functional currencies into a different currency. We've already accounted for all the cash flow differences, right? Because the functional currency is telling me that this is going to be the cash flows for this particular entity given its currency obligations. Remeasurement, and I will repeat this a few more times. Remeasurement, any remeasurement, as we saw when we were doing transactions, most of the time will go through the income statement. Translation does not go through the income statement. Translation goes through other comprehensive income as reported through equity.